Oh yeah, here we go. Practice acquisition. There are pitfalls throughout the entire process. All right, guys. Another episode of Dental Acquisition Uncensored. We are in the middle of Shark Week, and today I am interviewing another top broker in their class, Tommy Newton with Xite Practice Sales. We went over some really good stuff that I feel like you didn't hear in the rest of the Shark Week episodes. We really stayed in the lease world because the lease is such an important piece to the acquisition. We talked about the lease assignment issues. We talked about the landlord psychology and mental state as you approach them on an acquisition. We talked about if the seller owns the property, how that changes the dynamic of the deal and the pros and cons there, how that affects cash flow when they own the property. Earlier on the episode, we talked about the need for you to have a team and be able to approach the brokers with a plan, a specific plan that's not too generic, but not too specific so that you don't minimize your opportunity. We talk a lot about that. And then one of my favorite pieces is there is a real thing when it comes to bad team members on your team as a buyer. You could have the wrong CPA, the wrong consultant, the wrong banker, the wrong attorney that actually is counterproductive to you winning and not paying too much. You need a team. That's number one. You're going to hear that. But there's a such thing as a bad team member, and we talk a little bit about that. So guys, buckle up. Another episode of Shark Week. Let's get it going.
Acquisition Uncensored. The truth when buying and selling a dental practice. And now your host, Michael Dincio.
All right, guys. Let's start this next episode of Shark Week, Practice Broker Shark Week. We have taken our audience through a journey, and we are making our way across the country. And I hope you listeners have had a lot of fun. But today, I am introducing a friend of the family here that highly experienced and has a fantastic firm. They own the Texas area and other areas around them. I'll leave it to Tommy to kind of give the rundown here. But Tommy Newton, owner of Xite Practice Sales. They have 6 offices, 5 practice brokers. They're doing a lot of stuff. I respect what they do and I like working with them. And so here we are, Shark Week episode. I don't even know which one we're on, but we're making our way through the journey. So Tommy, thanks for joining, man. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Thanks a ton. Looking forward to it.
You always
conversation.
The best part about Shark Week is the accents as I make my way across and south. So here we are in Texas. Tommy's got the Texas sound. I love it. It's awesome. I'm just a hillbilly from Ohio, and so I'm boring. But Tommy's got that Texas slang. So Tom, tell me about Xite Practice Sales. What gets you guys up in the morning? What are you guys all about? Just give the audience who you are.
Yeah, sure. So, myself and 3 friends started this company back on February 1st of 2013. We worked for 10 years together before that doing this. Our firm does 2 things. It's represent dentists in real estate transactions, whether it's a startup or going on into multiple locations, buying buildings, buying land, et cetera. And then, of course, the other division that I'm in charge of is our practice sales acquisitions division, where we represent dentists that are, selling their practice. And sometimes that's a dentist that's selling to another dentist for the typical transition. Sometimes it's one that's going to partner with a DSO. It all made sense to do it together because, on the real estate side, a dentist might want to do a startup and they might not. They might want to buy a practice. So we always wanted to be able to provide them a solution, whether it was the startup route or the transition route, and for us to be able to have kind of a group of listings that we could put in front of them and help them out. We want to be a part of the dental community. We want we want these great practices to continue to be great practices, and for the dental industry to grow however it is. It's, it's something that is needed out there, obviously.
Well, it's super comprehensive because like I had you guys on Shark Week last year on Startup Uncensored, our other podcast that focuses on startups. Brandon did a great job interview. It was a great interview. But here we are in the acquisition side, and you're right. There is so much crossover. You start with someone that's going to do a startup and they find a practice, and then you transition over there, and then, or the opposite. Hey, I want to buy, which is the most common, right? Where a buyer starts down this ownership journey and flips over to startups. So you're speaking my language. You've got 2 podcasts specifically for that reason, startup acquisition. And so you guys are on both sides. And so that's super cool. Let's get right into it, Tommy. Like this is totally unscripted, folks. We have zero agenda other than providing you great information. I want to remind you all to hit the show notes below. Tommy and Xite Practice Sales will have all the links and stuff that you can get a hold of Tommy, and they can walk you through the practices they have and maybe even help you get a startup going. But big picture, Tommy, I ask all the practice brokers the same question, and it is, what could a buyer do to get into first position on one of your practices that's different than what everybody else is doing? Like what makes them unique? I coach people on this all the time, but there's a lot of people that aren't going to hire me. So for those people, what can they do to get into first position? Because it's one of the hottest markets there's been in the last decade, if you know what I mean.
It's something else. Like, say we have that typical practice that everybody's looking for. It's a $1 million practice, fee for service, PPO, right? And in a usually a large metropolitan area. If we put that out on the open market, we're going to get 30 to 40 non-disclosure agreements signed within the first 48 hours. And so what happens is that agreement goes out, it's signed, and then we send out a buyer information form. We want to understand, who this doctor is, and are they prepared, and what's their history, and have they, talked to a lender before, because obviously you got to have the funds. You need the team around you. And and that goes for probably any of my competitors out there. The same amount of buyers are coming in because it's such a seller's market. So with us, when that happens and we have 40, 50, 60 practices on the market, you can imagine a broker weeding through all that. There's really just not enough time in the day to have a conversation with each one of them. You would love to.
It's like interviewing for hygienists right now, or not. It's the opposite of that.
Right?
I mean, if you have all of these applications, anybody that's hired for a job and you get a ton of applications, it's like, how do you sort through them, right?
That's it. It's a job interview, right? It's a very competitive job interview. How do you make yourself stand out when everybody's filling out the same information? And we have a list. So if you go to one of our brokers, it's next door, Duff, one of our vice presidents here in the Dallas office. If you go in his office, on his board, he's got about 15 dentists. These are ones that have, at the very get-go, they've said, I talked to this lender. I've got all my information with them. I am pre-approved. This is my work history. I know this attorney. I know this consultant. I use this CPA, right? They've got their team around. They know what they're looking for. They know where they want to go. They don't say things like, oh, yeah, Dallas or maybe Houston. Like that doesn't. No, I'm really looking in Fort Worth, North Fort Worth, or they'll say, they are able to tell us, I'm a buyer. I've got my team together. I'm ready to go, and I know what I want, and I know where, and I'm a buyer now. And so what that is to us is surety of close. And it's a story that we're able to take to our seller, because most of our sellers are saying, look, the economics are very important. Yes, but I want to transfer my patients to someone I'm comfortable with. I want to get along with them. There's going to be a lot going on even after the sale. We got to go through the negotiations, economics, how everything's going to work, the timeline, of course. But after the sale, as you know, Michael, the 30 days right after it's closing, there's a lot that goes on there. You're transferring a business that someone ran for 20 or 30 years to someone who may have never run a business at all.
May have
everything that
majority
they've done. Oh my goodness.
haven't ran a business before.
It's an undertaking. And, and that's where you guys are so important in the, helping out with that piece is so important. And so, I mean, there's a few, don't get me wrong. We'll have some clients here and there, some deals go where it's purely economic and it just, for whatever reason. But I'd say 90% of them, they want to sell to somebody that they know and feel comfortable with and think their patients and their staff are going to be in good hands. And that, from a clinical standpoint, they think the same way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I'm hearing you say, Tommy, is having a specific plan for what you want, a vision, so to speak. Mm-hmm. We talk about vision all the time on the program, but like having a vision for what you were looking for, a specific vision. Now, I love that because you're right. Most of the calls that I take, it's just kind of like, I don't know. Help me out.
I want a good one, $1 million. I want to.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
but here's my, let's take this a little deeper. If they're too specific, is that a problem?
Well, right. That can knock down the pool that you have to choose from.
Yeah. So maybe is it a balance between the two? Maybe like, hey, I'm good with all of DFW anywhere within an hour drive. Tell me what you got type of
that's
thing.
Okay. You still need the team.
Number
one, you got to show that you have the ability to buy this. So the lending really is probably the number one piece to be able to say, I spoke with so-and-so at this bank, and everybody probably knows there's a handful of banks that really focus on this. Mm-hmm. Because what's going to happen as part of our responsibilities is we're going to need to talk to that lender. Mm-hmm. We're going to need to not only hear it from the prospective buyer, but usually we're going to talk to the lender. They're not going to give us any private information at all, but they are going to say, yes, the way you've priced this practice, the procedures that this dentist does today, and we feel comfortable underwriting and giving this doctor so-and-so amount of money. They won't tell us the amount, but enough to qualify to purchase this practice, because we have to give that information over to our seller. That's kind of what they're hiring us for.
I mean, a lot of buyers get a little bent about communication from the other side to mm-hmm. their people. And I want the audience to know that is actually a normal process. I think the idea of a buyer's rep, which is what I am, is a new concept that is kind of what am I trying to say?
Intermediary.
Between all of that, because talking to a banker about your financials and all of that can feel a little private, but at the same time, folks, you have to understand that the other side needs some confidence that you can get to the finish line. Otherwise, why are they going to take the practice off the market? Right.
That's right. Because when you're going through the letter of intent which is pretty much the business terms of the deal, once that's done, in good faith, both parties are trying to move forward and get that done. We are not out there continuing to market the practice. We are not taking on additional non-disclosure agreements and trying to do this unless something happens in the deal, some sort of material stall or mm-hmm. issue or red flag. And to further expand, these lenders, they're not going to give us any personal information. They're not going to tell us if the practice is priced well below what the buyer could afford. The lender's just going to say, we could underwrite for this. They're never going to tell us, they could pay a lot more. That's not how it works at all. It's simply just pre-approval. It doesn't have any numbers attached to it when we're talking to them.
That's really good. So team is kind of what we're taking it back to. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great. I think that's been a very overwhelming theme for Shark Week is have a plan and have a team. And that's you're right on par without even talking to the other sharks. You're right on par with everybody else. I haven't gone here. Let's go here because I want each episode to be a little bit unique. What is there such thing as a bad teammate? Should I go? Let's go there.
No, I'm glad you went there.
So let me set the table. Let me set the table, Tommy, because I had a buyer just last week say, "Hey, a practice broker said I was not getting this deal because of the buyer rep that they chose. Would you represent me?" And I'm like, there's a lot there, right? And we call it Shark Week because there are some sharks out there. The ones we've interviewed are not sharks. You guys are all quality. You're dialed. The evaluations aren't crazy. You're professional. There's a lot of practice brokers that are absolutely sharks. Hence the pun of the program. But the point is when I get a call like that, I've got a flag up saying, well, is this broker trying to pull something over? Like now all of a sudden I don't trust it. But when I dug into it, I actually called the broker and said, what's the story? And the broker said that they worked on a deal with this particular professional and it got out of hand quickly. And so therefore they're not going to take their seller through that process with that particular professional. So full circle. Mm-hmm. Let's have a conversation about bad teammates and let's do it.
Yeah. I've had attorneys. Look, what we're talking about here is specializing in something. All of us are, right? Dentists, they're special. They have a specialty too, right? So why would you go through a dental M&A transaction with an estate attorney that does wills, right? And so what happens is you'll always, every now and then, actually, not always, you'll have someone say, yeah, my brother-in-law, my so-and-so or whatever, they're an attorney. And that's, and they just don't do this. That will kill a deal. If they don't know what we're talking about, what we're working through, what are real issues, what are not. Many people have probably heard this, but time kills deals. And an attorney that just they're not a bad attorney. They just don't specialize in this. Mm-hmm. And other attorneys sometimes will not work with them. There are attorneys out there that just do this. And if there's an attorney on the other side of the table they've never heard of, doesn't have any M&A experience, they're just like, look, guys, it's just not worth my time. It's going to be a crazy overload. I don't think
it might be worth their time, but the bill is going to be astronomical for no reason.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It doesn't have to be.
So I love that point. That could also be transferred over to dental bankers, non-attorneys, non-CPAs, consultants that aren't familiar with M&A. I've had that. Consultants that were great practice consultants. Think of a hygienist or a front office consultant that was great at helping the hygiene team grow that division or that department. Do you think they know a ton about M&A? Probably not.
No. Yeah. It's that's the number one. You're looking for people that do this all the time and specialize. They're going to help you through a lot of hurdles, save you some time, save you some money. But that's the one that we probably come across that can really, and they don't come in till the end. So then you're really talking about a lot of work has been done by everybody, and then they can gum up a deal.
Yeah. So good stuff.
Something else to think about too.
Let's go.
Is the assignment of the lease. If you had anybody talk about that, that's at the end of a deal too. A landlord.
Let's talk about. I actually just had an email just right now, and it's heating up. It's heating up. So let's talk about that. Yeah.
So just from the buyer's perspective, so they understand the reason why a landlord may be like this.
Well, set the tone, Tommy. Set the tone.
Yeah.
A lease, the assignment,
where we are and how we get there. So you get a deal. You got a deal all the way going to the goal line, and the seller has leased this space for 10, 15, 20 years, right? Well, in order for the buyer to take over that lease, an assignment is done. And it's just simply that. It is a document that says the buyer will take over all the responsibilities, economic and legally, of the lease, pay it, go forward. The landlord has to approve that. So you can't just have anybody come through. And so when you're talking to a landlord, you got to think about this. A tenant is an investment in a landlord's building. That tenant pays them money. They pay the mortgage for that landlord. So a landlord has a known commodity. They know them. They've been paying them month in and month out for 20 years.
20
It's
years.
a good relationship. All of a sudden you're saying, I'm going to take somebody who's I've known for 20 years that has been doing a great job in paying me and knows what they're doing, taking them out. And they're very financially well off because they've been working for a while. And I'm going to bring someone in half the age who I don't know.
A third of the age.
Yeah. I don't know them. I don't know if they're good at it. I don't know what their financials are. I've got a really good one here, I know. But now I'm just going to let these guys come in. Nuh-uh. So what they're going to do is they're going to want to look at the buyer's financials as well. They're going to want to know who they are. They're going to probably want to talk to the bank. And then on top of that, they're not in a hurry because they've got the rent come in no matter what. You can't push them or make them do that. If the lease has, 5 years left on it or longer, they're just not in a leveraged situation. So you have to play nice. You are very much asking them to do this. And you're saying, look, I'm going to be a good tenant. I'm going to be there longer. Eventually, this guy's going to retire. This girl's going to retire. So you're not going to have them forever. And you got to kind of state that. So that needs to be done, earlier in the transaction than most people do it because the landlord just doesn't have to move quickly. And if you wait till the last week, could be in trouble.
I'm glad you brought up lease stuff because, Xite does both sides. So you guys are trained professionals in this, both departments, but it's not that acquisitions don't have any leases. They do. Let's touch on this. You talked about the assignment clause and that's specifically an issue or could be an issue. And you talked about those dynamics, but let's take it one step further because I think this is really good. Oftentimes buyers, you are going to take an over the market deal or above market deal on a lease with an acquisition. You are, here we are negotiating for the practice and, working with the seller and getting all of the work in progress figured out and the accounts receivables. And there's all these little negotiating points for this transaction. Yeah. And it's quite the process. Tommy works his side. I work my side and it's quite the process. And then you get to the lease and to your point, Tommy, like that usually gets kind of pushed to the end.
Yeah.
But you really have zero leverage with the landlord. A startup, totally different.
It's
empty space. You can pit them against 5 other spots. You could, do your thing and try to sell yourself and let the best offer win type of a scenario. An acquisition, what are you going to do? You're going to buy the practice and then relocate it? No, you have to. So Tommy, talk about that dynamic a little bit. I'm stealing the show, but you're the expert here. Go on.
You got to give yourself time. When you don't have leverage, you have to give yourself time to work at the landlord's pace because you've got to be nice. And you might be working with a property management company. You may never even talk to the landlord. There could be a $2,500 fee for an assignment in the existing master lease, right? So go ahead and agreeing to that and getting that payment over to them early, showing them that you're responsible, you're quick to act, you're responsive. I mean, you're very much playing nice. They have all of the leverage. They know that you are deep in the negotiations. You probably have attorney's fees. You've been working on this for a while. You want to buy this company. The other person wants to sell the company. So they're usually not going to unreasonably withhold, which is the language in a lease, an assignment, but they're going to do their due diligence and it's not going to go quickly. It'll hold up the whole deal and you can't go demanding anything and you don't have another place to kind of, like you talked about, pit them against or leverage them against. So it needs to be thought of sooner than most people think of it.
Yeah, it's a doozy. It's a doozy in the acquisition world, but there's no solve for it. Let's talk about
the only thing with us that's been nice is because we do a couple hundred startups a year. Many times when we're selling a practice, we might know that landlord or developer because we've put somebody else in their building. So what we do is use the leverage of our company to say, hey, you've seen us bring you other new tenants for new buildings before. We'll continue to do that. We need this relationship. Or what other buildings do you have? Because I have a whole real estate division over here that's doing 200 deals a year. Let me introduce you to my brokerage team. Everybody would love to have a dentist in there because, as you know, the default rate for a startup, 3, 4, 5, 6%, depending on where you are. So that's about what you have to, what you have to use for leverage. It's about the only thing out there on the market.
Yeah,
sometimes that's a success.
That is a game. That is a bit of a game changer. We're staying in that lease space just because it is. We've talked about so much of the PSA, the acquisition and deal terms with a lot of the other brokers. Let's stay in this lease a little bit longer just because it's great for conversation. I had a deal once where a real estate broker, you guys are all real estate brokers, but not the practice broker. Another real estate broker came into the deal and they were dental specific. They knew what they were doing. But they were trying to create some leverage on the acquisition to score a better deal for the buyer. So they started talking about, hey, I've got this other space and it's right down the road and it's already pre-built. And, I was fairly young in the buyer rep world. And I trusted this broker because they were in dental. Come to find out, I will never do that again, no matter how much the story kind of makes sense, because essentially the buyer could have taken that practice over to a pre-built dental office and just plugged and played. And it was technically right up the road. And so you could see kind of the strategy there. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you, as much as that story made sense to try to create leverage with this, mm-hmm. with the landlord mm-hmm. that had the lease of the acquisition, it went south on us so quick, and the buyer ended up paying more in their lease in the end. It didn't work out. So let me tell you, if someone, right, Tommy, if someone takes you down that path,
captive audience, and the landlord went from, I was willing to just do a simple assignment and work through it typically for you, but now if you want to play it like this, well, we'll do it my way. I know what my leverage is. They know. They know. You're playing nice on this piece. Now, when you get into, we can do this if you want to, but if you want to get into if the selling dentist owns their building.
Yeah, let's get. I haven't touched that, so let's get into it. Yeah, we got a few more minutes. Let's go. If the seller does have the real estate, it does change the dynamic of the entire deal. How is that? Why?
Definitely. It does from a lot of different perspectives. One, if you're, one that's probably going to be a pretty attractive, transition for everybody, right? Because what dentist wouldn't like to own their office as well, the real estate as well, right? Great from a lot of different purposes. Your PLLC can pay your LLC, and it's and then when you sell later on, it can be just a mailbox money income opportunity for you. It could be an investment sale or sell leaseback opportunity. There's a lot of different things that you can do there, which options are great, right? Who knows what the market will do when it's your turn. And eventually you'll have it free and clear. Also, it allows you, when you're buying the practice, if you do need to move money from the real estate piece, from a lending standpoint, from the practice piece, right? It allows you to move it back and forth because the bank has that real estate as collateral, not just kind of your personal guarantee and the assets or the goodwill of the company there, which goodwill is tough as a collateral piece, as more. So that gives you more ability there too, if you are buying the practice, to be competitive by maybe moving those around a little bit if you do or find yourself in a competitive situation with some other buyers, which you typically might. So that's really nice there. But at the same time, when you're working through those transactions, the bank's going to have an appraisal. That's going to take time. They're probably going to charge you for that as well, a few $1,000s. That appraisal is going to need to meet the price that you're willing to pay, or else you're going to come out of pocket. If anybody's bought a house before in this market, which has just changed, but when you're buying these houses for $50,000 over ask, they're usually not appraising for that. So you're having to bring cash to the table. Same instance here if it doesn't appraise. But
and I will note, most banks aren't doing 100% financing across the country. The audience is a national audience here in Texas. I know it's a rule of thumb. Dare I ask where the average sale price does come in of revenue in Texas? Again, rule of thumb, and you never use rule of thumb, folks, but what is it in that market on average? 85, 92?
Yeah, it still holds true there. And if you have something that's just such a competitive situation with several, you can definitely see the 100 or, go above that.
So I only ask because the banks that if the practice is selling closer to like an 85%, you might have some money to lend to throw at the real estate. But most of you guys buying practices are going to get 100% financing on the practice, including accounts receivables. And Morgan Stump over Provide broke a lot of that down for us earlier in the season. But when it comes to real estate purchasing, you are going to have to come out of pocket for money.
Yeah, usually 20% down is something you can count on. Sometimes it's 10. Sometimes you can look at an SBA, small business loan, where they'll do less as long as you occupy more than 51% of the building. Because, sometimes you might be buying a dental office that's in a building that also has a tenant, because the selling doctor owned that as an investment as well, but you wouldn't be able to qualify for one of those loans if you only occupied 40% of the building, as an example. And so those can be really nice loans, but they take longer. We're talking, about that. So you got to have that in your timeline when you're going through closing.
Okay, so we talk about lending and kind of like the pros of getting a building on a purchase sale where you could have two assets to sell at the end of your career, and that's a great thing. I've seen a lot of nonsense in the practice brokering world where the net adjusted income is you know where I'm going with this. Folks, we talked a lot about trying to calculate cash flow properly so that how much money you can kind of predict come close date and your first year in business. That's never going to be perfect. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to look at historicals, figure out what money that business threw off, and try to predict for the future. That's ultimately what you're doing. But when the brokers or the sellers, let's say even non-brokered sales, when an owner owns the building, you have to pay attention to what rent they are charging themselves as the dentist that is renting their own space. I hope that makes sense. And Tommy, let's walk through that because a lot of people miss that part.
That's right. Well,
and we'll end here. We'll end on this. This is perfect.
Okay. Depending on, what their CPA says, for tax purposes, it might be beneficial for them to charge them personally owning the building as the landlord to charge their company, the PLLC, the practice, above market rent to reduce revenue, therefore reduce tax liability, right? So you're right. And I don't know what everybody does out there, but we always internally adjust all that before it goes to market because it needs to be in line with market rents. All that has to line out. And usually it's a good thing because what's happening is if they were charging themselves more, we're adding to EBITDA by making the rent market rent.
Bingo.
There are some instances where they do charge less, and you need to pay attention to that as well, because what you're talking about is what your net is at the end of the day. Now when you're buying the building and the practice and you're playing landlord and tenant and all that, of course your nets all come down to a bottom line there, and you're going to need to understand that. But it is a lot more to pay attention to. And there are expenses on buildings, taxes, insurance, common area maintenance, which is just landscaping, repainting the parking lot, keeping the building, standing up, the basics, right? There are additional costs there that you have to take into account. And sometimes in the P&Ls of the practice, they may not have carried those over and charged the tenant like you usually would in a triple net lease. Maybe they were just holding them themselves. Well, that's going to be costs that you're going to have either way, which, as you know, is going to affect just in general the operating costs of owning the building, owning the practice, all that still needs to line up for you to have enough net to pay all your debt and make some money.
This is such a great conversation. We may have lost you folks, but
yeah, I'm sorry.
No, Tommy, this is perfect because folks rewind it and re-listen to that maybe a couple times, because if you are buying a practice and you don't buy the building that the seller of the practice owns, there's really a lot of due diligence there. And unlike Xite practice sales, they might not have the real estate knowledge or dare I say ethical, integrity. There's a lot of practice brokers out there or sellers that don't have any representation, which could be even worse. When they're trying to represent what your cash flow is going to be, you have to understand what your rent's going to be, because it's not really the rent that they're probably doing to themselves. So hopefully that makes sense. Tommy did a great job of explaining that, probably better than me for sure, but really, really key. We could have a podcast or just on that topic. Oh, shoot.
Oh, it goes way on down the road of you planning for yourself and your exit down and what you can do with that property. And if you could pull money out of it for additional expansion, if you bought a practice that had other operatories that could be, plumbed out or chaired out and not. So there's so many different things you can do there. If you have the opportunity to buy a practice with the real estate, great. If the owner is going to keep the real estate, like you said, hopefully they do everything the right way. But remember, they were paying themselves. So they probably they didn't care about all the details. Didn't have to.
Yeah.
Now they've got a tenant, which is you. It needs to be right. It needs to be accurate.
I think the global takeaway here is if you could buy the real estate, do it. And that's my general rule of thumb suggestion. Now, if the building was $3-4 million, maybe a little dental practice couldn't afford that. Depends. Depending on the market. We're talking to Tommy here in Texas. The market's not like that in Seattle or Pasadena, California. It's totally different. Real estate values are insane in a lot of different markets. It's across the country, and real estate's not a possibility. But if you are in Texas, it probably is a possibility, right, Tommy? That happens a lot.
It definitely is. And probably the last thing I'd leave you with is sometimes we'll have a buyer come in and they want to buy the building and it just doesn't make sense from an underwriting standpoint yet. So we'll usually structure something where, hey, buy the practice and you'll have a right of first refusal or a must take in a year or two. You're going to get the building. That's wonderful. Just remember this. What makes the money to buy the building? It's the practice. Concentrate on that first. You can get the rights that nobody can take it or buy it out from underneath you. But sometimes people will put the real estate in front of what makes the money to pay for the real estate. And so just keep those things in mind. And it's okay if you have to rent it for a year or two or something like that in order to pay down the debt a little bit, improve the production of the practice, or just show the bank that you know what you're doing and you can operate and go on from there. So not the cart before the horse thing.
Well said. That's a perfect ending point. That well said, Tommy. That's probably that's one of the best gold nuggets. Hopefully our listeners lasted 30 minutes to hear us just ramble about this stuff. But that's a great one. Tommy, any last comments about Xite or how they can get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, our website, XITECO, Xite Companies, XITECO.com. Just go there. We work nationally, got our 6 offices in Georgia, Florida, and Texas, and whether it's real estate or practice sales, or if you just want to run something by us, if you need to know somebody else in the industry that's done a really good job for other clients, we're just all about the support. We talk to people today and may not work for them at all, may work for them in 5 years. We're happy to be a part of the industry. We want to be an educational resource. So look us up. There's a lot on the website too. Whatever we can do to help, we're happy to.
And there it is, folks. Tommy Newton with Xite Practice Sales. That's a common theme with the folks that I interview. I think one of the biggest things that you all don't take advantage of is calling these people. These people know what they're doing. They have experience. even if they can't help you in their market, they have experience to help you. Tommy talked about the team today and how important that is. Tommy can be on your team in an indirect way, or someone from his team can help. They just want to help. That's what this program is all about, is helping. And so, we're blessed to be in the industry, and it's we're giving back ultimately. The industry's been great to us, right, Tommy? And we're
Absolutely.
just simply giving back. So, Tommy, thanks for being on the show and being a part of Shark Week. And we will sign off here, my friend. Thanks for being.
Yeah, I'm honored. Thanks, Michael.
Tune in next time for another truth-filled episode of Acquisition Uncensored. We want to hear from you. Interact with your host, Michael Dincio. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Comment and subscribe.